We're continuing our program of oral histories. This is Ray Mofield and Shelby McCallum, the two interviewers, and the program is brought to you in Marshall County by WCBL Radio as a public service. The tapes that will be produced will be stored in Frankfort at the Kentucky State Archives, at the Forest Pogue Oral History Library at Murray State University, and in the Marshall County Library. Our guest here in the studio for the next half hour is George Little. George, welcome to the microphone. Were you born in Marshall County?
That's right, Ray. I was born on the farm I'm now residing.
The Littles came to Marshall County, do you know how long ago?
Well, according to the history, we can trace it back that my grandfather came from North Carolina as a small boy, 10, 11 years old, came to the Brownsburg area and lived there with some people, and then when he became 16, that he bought the farm where I am now living.
What was your, do you know your grandparents on both sides?
Yes.
Your dad was Hardy Little, I believe.
That's correct. But my grandfather Little died before I could remember him. But my grandparents on my mother's side, who was Solomons, lived what I would say cross the road on the Calvert City Road.
That's a famous name in Marshall County. Of course, I knew your dad, and I knew your brother Joe, who was a year ahead of me in college, and then I knew your sister Addie Mae, and we're in the same class, and her husband William Roy Draffin. We're all in the class, high school class of 40. Of course, I went to Hardin, and I guess they both went to Calvert, did they?
Calvert, that's correct.
I remember Joe played basketball at Murray State. So we got the Solomons and the Littles together. Do you have any idea about the genealogy all the way back across the ocean? Did they come from England, Wales, Ireland, Scotland?
The latest I can get is that it was back in North Carolina. Some fought they fought in the Civil War, some from on the north side and some on the south.
That real problem that many Kentucky families had.
Right.
They were divided.
Now, my grandmother, Little side, she was a Blewett. They came from Warren County, around Bowling Green, and they were very active in the Southern Confederate Army.
Yes, the Bowling Green was one of the headquarters for Albert Sidney Johnson's army, and of course, when they voted the Confederate state, the 13th star in the Confederate flag, I believe they made that decision. It was Russellville, wasn't it? Was that? And so we had two Confederate commissioners elected all over.
Ray, you're going back too far for me to...
Well, I believe you have a brother in Bowling Green, don't you?
That's cousin.
Cousin.
Yes. He was Uncle Tom, who was a doctor at Calvert, and
George, where'd you go to school?
where did I go? I went to Palma Grade School.
Palma Grade School. Do you remember any of your teachers?
I certainly do. But the first teacher I had was Marguerite Walker. She's later married, and she lives in California at the present time. And the last 8th grade teacher I had was Edwin Jones.
Oh, I know him.
He was my
yeah.
8th grade teacher. And we had a very active school at Palmo. You remember, we had 2 rooms, and very active.
Oh yes, I remember that school well. In
Yeah.
fact, it was there till it seems to me fairly recent times. I can't tell you the exact year. On the same side of the road that Irvin Poe's store was on.
That's right. There in Palmo, but starting in where the Texas Gas is now, going on to where the cutoff road is, going over to North Marshall.
You had a Methodist church there on the left.
And that back years ago, we had a post office, we had a restaurant, and a blacksmith shop. And it all was operated by the family with Pew Peck Po Pow Pill Pew. That's who the family.
And at that school, you used to have a lot of entertainment, singings and picnics and things, right?
I can remember your friend from up at Hardin, Toby Clark.
Oh
He
yes.
used to come down there.
Brought a little movie, didn't he?
Show his the old movies.
And he played the part of Toby, the old what you call minstrel show character, and then so they nicknamed his name was really Roy, but everybody called him Toby Clark because he played that role in these.
You know, Ray, one of the things I will never forget in Palmo grade school, I was in the 5th grade, and my sister was in the 7th. And a softball team that we had, that my sister decided she wanted to play ball, so she beat me out at first base, and they moved me to right field. She'd like to never let me live that down.
No, it probably still reminds you of it
That's
occasionally. All right, and then you, after you left Palmo, where was your high school education?
I went to Calvert City.
Calvert. And
It was the same distance from our driveway to Benton, Sharp, and Calvert. But my uncle, whose dad's oldest brother, was practicing medicine in Calvert, and he wanted Joe to come to Calvert.
mm-hmm.
So Dad yielded the wishes, and
Was your grandfather a physician?
no, my grandfather, oldest son,
What was a physician?
Tom.
Yeah. Oh,
Tom.
okay. Well, I knew there was a doctor involved there, but I.
Yeah, his dad's oldest brother. He had 2 brothers and 1 sister lived to be 8 old. He had a younger sister that died.
I remember in those days. Of course, I was in Hardin, as I said, at the same time your sister was at Calvert, and we had 8 little high schools then.
That's right.
Do you think we were anything like as good as the present high school?
I would say no.
We didn't have very much to offer in those days. Of course, in the basic subject, I suppose you can only learn so much. We learned grammar and English and spelling and reading and writing, arithmetic, geometry, algebra, those subjects, fine, but we didn't have any science laboratories. We
That's
couldn't
right.
teach physics or chemistry or biology, or we
Well,
didn't have music,
You know,
except vocal music.
well, no one had any money. But I remember is the first time that I ever had a dollar bill in my pocket. I was graduating in the 8th grade, and we were going to have our 8th grade commencement. Went to Paducah that Saturday before. Mom gave me $1. Told me to get my hair cut and have my picture made. So I went and had my picture made before I had my hair cut.
She didn't like that very much.
Georgia
That's
dollar,
correct.
a bigger dollar then than they are now.
Pardon?
It was a bigger dollar.
That's right.
Well, George, you then, did you play basketball? And
Yes,
Everybody that went to Calvert City played basketball.
that's right.
Who was the coach back in?
Eldred Simpson. He was the principal and coach.
And a great one. He later went to Murray State. He took a team to the state tournament, didn't he?
No,
Wasn't that-
Eldred never did. Hardin beat us in the finals the year that they had their good team.
That was 41 when you were
in
playing.
41, I was.
Now,
junior then.
earlier when Joe was a senior, did they go? No, I'll tell you,
No, Sharp won it in
38.
38.
Seemed to me like Calvert went around 35, 34, 35.
About 35 or 6, so they went 2 years in a row.
That's what I was
If you
thinking. But it
remember-
wasn't Eltis Henson coaching then.
Gibbersfield had a good team at Gibbersfield with Metcalf.
I remember Leonard Metcalf, one of the world's best. After the war, he went to Iowa and played in the Big Ten and made the all-conference team. Someone said that if John Paget had come back from Hardin after the war and Joe Fawkes had gone back to Murray instead of the Philadelphia Pro Club and Leonard Metcalf had gone to Murray instead of Iowa, John Miller had been the greatest coach in the world.
You know, after I finished at Calvert City, I went to Tennessee Tech. I got fortunate enough getting a scholarship down at Tennessee Tech, and the athletic director was
Putty overall.
Eddie Overall.
Yeah.
And he told me after the war that I went back for a while after World War II. And he told me that the history, how Joe Fawkes first went to pro ball.
Mhm.
He said that when Joe was in service, he contacted him and offered him about anything he wanted to finish up at Western. He said, I won't be able to play ball. I'm going back to Murray. He said, I didn't want to play against him. So I contacted the owner of the Philadelphia Warriors, who was a good friend of mine. Told him I knew of a good ball player. I told him his name. He said, I never heard of him. He said, no, you never heard of him and nobody else. But somebody's going to hear of him someday. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pay his salary 1 year if he's not good enough to make your ball team. He said, Ed, I'll sign him up on your recommendation.
Yeah, Joe was talking to Rayburn Watkins, and I were always kind of professional students at Murray, and we'd rather beat Western as anybody on earth. So we organized that famous rally when we beat Western that year and issued everybody a red towel and waved it, you know, in the gym.
Red towel.
Psychological warfare that we pulled on Western. And we beat the 36 Armored Division that year and so on. And Joe was saying that he went into the Fleet Marine Corps and they assigned him to play basketball. And also on the club was a fellow named Andy Phillip. Now, Andy Phillip played for the Illinois Whiz Kid team of 43, supposedly the greatest team that ever lived on the face of the earth. Well, Joe was sort of a self-effacing sort of fella, and he said, you know, I just noticed that I was better than Andy Phillip. And so he was by far a greater player than Andy Phillip was. And they were beginning to catch on. We played the 36 Armored Division at Murray one time. They had 7 All-Americans on the team. And Murray beat them. And it like killed him.
Well, Adolph Rupp, after World War II, he had 2 All-Americans sitting on bench, didn't he?
Yeah, Jack Tingle and was Wilkinson, and I forgot. I remember the incident, though, that you're talking about. Well, George, I guess we better roll along. Time is flitting. It's hard for me to realize that I went to school with Addie Mae, and now I've got your daughter in class, Ann Little, at Murray State, and she made an A in the course.
Well,
What do you think about that?
she
Proud
did-
Papa?
She didn't get it from her daddy.
Okay. Well, okay, you got through high school at Calvert. You were in World War II. Where did you serve?
I was in the Air Force, and it was 54. I was Ray, but we were attached to the field artillery. The more or less was shuffling the wounded back off of the front line to the hospital.
Where did you train? Randolph Field?
Pardon?
Did you train at Randolph?
Oh, we took the training mostly in Salt Lake City, and then later on we went down to Camp Hood, and when we attached to the artillery before we left to go overseas.
George, when did you got married,
That's right.
and whom did you marry?
I married a Chandler girl from Lyon County.
Lyon County, all right.
And
You have how many children,
I
George?
have 3. I have a girl, 32, and the boy, 26, and then
The baby daughter.
my baby daughter.
She doesn't like to be called the baby daughter, but she'll always be that probably. I
Well, I'm the baby myself, and I'll never let mother forget it.
guess. All right, George. I know you were sheriff once. How'd you get interested in politics?
Well, I was a small kid, and my grandpa was sheriff back before the turn of the century. In fact, he was sheriff 2 different times. He was sheriff on the
Was he a little?
right.
Okay.
He was sheriff on the 2-year term, and then they rewrote the Constitution, and
The new what we're now under was written in
That's right.
1890 and then came into effect in
and then
91.
he was elected for the 4-year term and could not succeed himself as it present stand.
Mm-hmm. So you might say heredity and environment both may have played a part.
Yeah. I just had a desire to serve, and that's all. I never seek any more office.
Now, you have the place where you're living, I know where it is now. There was a big, tall, white, 2-story frame house there.
That's correct.
And you've torn that down and built a more
Yeah.
modern brick home.
It burnt down last year in the sheriff office.
I'd forgotten that it burned, but I guess now that you mention it, I remember that. So then you were forced to... how many acres in the farm?
218 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Are you still farming some there, George? Or?
well, a good friend of mine, Ronnie Titchworth, is more or less using it for pasture for cattle.
All right, George, we'd like to get some kind of incidents that perhaps were amusing or that are famous family stories of some kind, either on your father, your mother, or yourself, or your wife, or so. When you met your wife, was it love at first sight? Did you just fall head over heels and 5 minutes time?
Well, I guess you call it. She lived over Qatar, and then it was 2 ferries to cross. So
You were a long way from your true love that way, weren't you?
So I just told her one night, I said, well, it's too far, takes too long to cross these rivers to come see you. So you will make up your mind that you're going to move over here or
Yeah.
stay in Lyon County. So she came over.
Okay. Well, that's a funny story, all right. Your dad was kind of a man who seemed to enjoy life, and he enjoyed going to ball games and always seemed to be happy. Did he have any funny stories that you remember?
No, not. But I have a hard time remembering a lot of things, Ray, that since I had my operation.
Yes, sir.
And it kind of, but the biggest thing that I thought everybody had forgotten it, no one even knew it. I was 5 years old. Came to Benton on Tater Day with Dad and my brother Joe in a wagon. We came to the covered bridge into Benton on 68. And Dad gave me 20 cents to spend.
That's a pretty good allotment for those days.
It was. Well, I spent 15 cents real quick. And I was in a corner drugstore. And I remember this as well as Jones, that it was John Paul Jones from Benton.
Mm-hmm.
He was working there in the drugstore. And I went up to the counter and he said, son, you want something? Well, I saw a couple of ladies sitting over there. That Benton, that one of them was Dr. Faust's wife. But anyway, they were eating a dish of ice cream. And I said, I want the same thing they got. So he put me a dish of ice cream out and a glass of water. I laid my nickel down. He said, that's 10 cents, son. I said, take the water back. I'm not thirsty. So he knew me. And so when he saw Dad, he told Dad, done him for that nickel. But after years ago, I went to work for the federal government up in Lexington. And Paul Jones was working with the federal government there in the same office. And he came in one day and told the people that I was working with, he said, I'd like to tell you one on the new member of the committee. And I didn't have any idea what he was going to say. And he told them about buying the ice cream, and I never will. So they hadn't let me forget that every time I see them.
Well, that's a priceless story. I'm glad you shared it with our people on the tape, and Now we can record that for history for time immemorial. So you. All right, that is it's quite funny. What was Calvert City like? Has it grown a great deal since the dam came
Oh,
along?
yes, it was all we had down there. The greatest operation they had in Calvert at the time was Norman Milling Company. It was, they used to have a mill there, and they had 2 trucks that sold flour to stores over to almost to Fulton, down to into Wingo and that area. And outside of that, but it just wasn't anything doing.
Well, George, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I know for a good many years after I got back out of the Navy and started working, I worked at WPAD Paducah. As a matter of fact, I hired Shelby McCallum and taught him how to operate a radio station. He worked for me on WPAD FM, where I built the first FM station in Kentucky, working for Pierce Lackey there. And one thing I did was to go to state basketball tournaments all the time, and I always saw George Little.
That's correct.
And let's see, was it James Merlin Solomon you were always with?
That's right, and Barton Pfizer.
Yeah. And do you remember any funny things that ever happened around the state tournament, or the people that went to the tournament? Or I know a lot of times I can't think of anything right offhand, but you and were always telling funny stories, it seemed to me like. And William Wesley Chumler, didn't he go?
You know, I'll never forget that Cecil Reed over at Simsonia and I came back to the hotel. We run into a coach here in Marshall County at the time, and it was the game after Kelly Coleman broke his scoring record.
68 points for Wayland.
And he made the statement that he said he couldn't play ball for me because he shoots too much. I called him by his name. I was, well, that's the reason you never come to the state tournament.
Yeah.
Because a boy has to shoot to score 68 points.
Well, that's right. Later, George, I saw that fellow. He's the only fellow I ever saw do this. I was director of news and sports at SIU Carbondale for 5 years. And Carbondale was playing Kentucky Wesleyan, and Kelly Coleman was then going there. And we had 2 officials who were, I would say, to put it kindly, favorable to the home team. And they had Coleman down, and a man was standing in the middle of his chest, and he was lying on his back on the floor. But he had the ball, and he flipped that ball with his fingers and scored a basket lying prone on the floor. The only person I ever saw do that.
What they call a foul on you?
That was quite something. Well, Shelby McCallum generally tries to close out these shows by asking at least one question. Shelby, do you want to take over?
Well, I've been around here quite a while, as George knows, and he was sheriff 4 years, and a great many events occurred during those 4 years period. That 4-year period, we had the Courier Journal down here on numerous occasions. We had some big singings, and I would like to ask George, what do you consider the most significant thing that happened while you were sheriff?
Well, Shelby, the most exciting thing that I can look back now was
When they shot the radio station up?
No, was down at the Sharp community in behind the Oakland Methodist Church of that road that I got word that someone was in that little house that was vacant. So I captured a prisoner from the Indiana State Penitentiary who was serving a life. I got word that someone was in that little house that was vacant. So I captured a prisoner from the Indiana State Penitentiary who was serving a life term. And that I never will forget that on another occasion that's the reason I guess I'll never carry a pistol, which might have reason I'm living today. I've always took the idea that a person wouldn't shoot an unarmed man and I don't hesitate to say that I've been scared a lot of times. But if I'm scared, if I had a gun, I would probably shoot on the spur of a moment. And I took the attitude that a gun was to kill and not to play with. And the reason I never did carry one, I remember out in Birmingham area, I arrested a man, went out there to arrest him, and his wife took a warrant for him for whipping her. I walked around the barn, and he hollered at me, and I looked up, and he had a shotgun and pointed at me. Well, if I had a pistol, I would have been inclined to shoot it, which I wouldn't.
So you never carried a gun?
That's correct.
Do you remember the night they shut the radio station up?
That's right.
They really put the bullets through here, and they just missed one of these $400 microphones.
And I remember the night they cut the tree down in front of the grocery store at Hardin.
George, in closing this program out, we've asked this question to all of our during all of our interviews. If you had your life to live over again, would you still pick to select Marshall County?
I don't see any reason why I wouldn't.
Well, that's fine. You've got the same answer that all the others have had.
The people are nice, and I made a living, and we have good churches, good highways, so why leave?
Thank you very much. This Ray Mofield. Shelby McCallum has also been with us, and our interviewee today has been George Little. His beautiful daughter Ann has also been along in the studio, and we're grateful for that. The program is produced as a public service by WCBL for the Marshall County Library, the Pogue Library of Oral History at Murray State University, and the State Archives in Frankfort. And that concludes our broadcast for today.
I think they can put that back together.